Hi guys. So this week I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about Ben's video. I think he posed a really good question as far as like what languages or about learning culture alongside of language and sort of what cultures do you learn and um, like if you learn dialects of a language or things like that. And at one point Ben even specifically mentioned Arabic and how complicated in a way that is because there are so many sort of subcultures of what we identify as Arab or whatever. And then in my experience, I've had the same thing while studying Persian. And actually, I thought about doing this video in Arabic or Persian, but much like Ben, I don't have time for subtitles right now. Obviously, culture is part of language. We can't avoid that. And studying culture is always part of language. Um, when Amy responded with her video, she sort of discussed the idea of studying the main culture first and then moving on, which is good, I think, for something like German. If you study German culture first and then move on to Austrian or maybe Swiss or something like that. Um, or in my case, when I studied French, it was you study French culture and then later we studied West Africa. I think when you're dealing with a culture like that, that does in a way has sort of a centralized focal point, which is the definition of centralized, that is centralized in a way like around France or around Germany. It's a bit easier to start there and then branch out. Ben's question with English, I think, is a great question. Do you study British English versus American English versus Australian English versus South African English or anything, Indian English? And where is your focal point? So I was thinking about with Arabic or with Persian, how do you handle that? Um, Persian's a little bit more similar to the to the case of like France or Germany or something where Persian tends to be very focalized around Iran, and then from there people study some of Afghan history, and then they might go into Tajikistan, but it's incredibly biased. I mean, I know Iranians, probably uneducated Iranians, but I know Iranians who told me they thought Tajik was Turkish, and they just assumed Tajiks were Turks. I'm like, no, no, they're definitely Persians. And so I totally get that feeling of what happens when it's time to learn another culture. In my case, I'm enthralled with Afghan history and Afghan dialects and Afghan languages and all these things. And then I'm almost now getting the butt end of the stick because it's like, well, I'm not fitting into this mainstream of what I want to study. So where do I go? What do I do? Who do I study with? Um, and it's a little bit frustrating, but I get it. With Arab culture, I think it's a bit different because while in courses in the States we do sort of discuss like an Arab identity or sort of pan-Arab nationalism, or we discuss Arab culture, that's still hard because there's North African culture. And technically Egypt is part of North Africa, but even Egyptian culture is different than sort of the rest of North African culture, which we still group together, and I'm sure each country is different. In Bilad Hashem, in the Levant, while we tend to group them, there are still differences from country to country. And then then we sort of break into the Gulf region, but then there are people like, where does Iraq fit into that? We call them like sort of Eastern Arabic when we discuss dialects, but they're not like Bilad Hashem, but they sit right by them. Um, Kuwait tends to get lumped in with the Gulf, but I know some Kuwaitis who even say they're like, we're not exactly a Gulf state, but they count it. I think Amy's advice is sort of starting with a centralized one, and sort of, or like the bigger one if you're doing some sort of like a Western imperial power like Germany or France or something, and then branching into other areas is good. When it comes to the Arab world, that's just really hard. I mean, because even with Arabic, we teach people a standard Arabic, but standard Arabic is very difficult to define, and where is that register of speech exactly? It's not Quranic. It's not what people speak on the streets. What we teach is a little bit lower than what you hear on the news. Like, it sits in this weird place. So how do you handle that? And if you want to teach that first, which is fine because it's nice to have that base, then how do you branch out of it? And how do you, without showing a bias, because while your professor is Austrian, and I think you said it was she, and she's allowed to have her bias, um, it's still almost in a way like, for example, if I were teaching Arabic and I only taught Palestinian or Jordanian dialect, and I only discussed cultures of Bilad al-Sham, what do I do with people who are interested in North Africa? What do I do with people who are interested in Egypt, who have no desire to ever go to Palestine or the Levant, or people who would rather be in Iraq because they do the military or something? It's the same thing with Persian. Me now, I'm on the receiving end. It's everybody wants to teach Iranian, and I want to learn Afghan, and I want to do Afghan history and Tajik history, and it's not there. And it's frustrating as a student to see that our interests are not being met and that things aren't sort of being taken care of. I don't know, it's hard. But yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys think. Obviously, like, comment, subscribe, leave any questions in our inboxes or in the comments below, and we will get back to you. We're starting up on some themes next week. So we're looking forward to that. I think you'll like a lot of them. And yeah, hope you guys have a great Monday.